All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us for our first nature program series of the month of September on this very first day of September. Thank you all for tuning in and joining us for our wildflower program, which we mixed it up a bit, keeping you on your toes. It's a Wednesday evening instead of our normal Thursday time slot, so we don't want to get too set in our ways. And I want to, before I hand things over to, I do just want to first take a moment to thank our nature program series sponsors, Hancock Lumber, Ragged Mountain Equipment, and White Mountain Oil and Propane for their financial support of our programming. I also want to take a moment to thank our members for their support as well, because membership dollars are a great way of supporting Tin Mountain's programming and allowing us to continue both in person and in virtual formats, bringing programming to you. So if you are a member, thank you. If you're not a member, it's something that we would encourage you to consider doing. And if that's not the right thing for you, you are also welcome to donate directly to Tin Mountain on our website. In the upper right hand corner, there is a support us link, and you can donate to the nature program series or look at membership information. It's the month of September. We're approaching the start of fall, and with that, we have some great upcoming nature programs. Many of our fall programs are avian themed, as is often the case. We actually have, despite the impending rain, the forecast for Pondicherry Wildlife Refuge up in the Whitefield Jefferson area for tomorrow, as of now, is looking pretty promising. And so there's actually an optional associated field trip with this program. A handful of us will be heading up to Pondicherry tomorrow morning to see some of the flowers that Lori's going to talk about this evening. We do have a few spots remaining for that. And if that's something you're interested in joining us on, if you go onto our website, there is a link to register online, and we will be doing a final weather check and sending out an email early tomorrow morning around 7 a.m. to confirm whether that program's going forward. So if that's something you're interested in, we would encourage you to join us on that. Upcoming programs as well include next weekend. We have on September 11th, that morning, we actually were excited to have Sandy McDermott, who was a resident of the Mount Washington Valley, recently relocated to Alaska, is actually back in the area. She is an artist, a scientific artist and illustrator, and she is doing an in-person field program that morning on wildlife sketching, with a focus on wildflowers. So that's an intro course. It should be very interesting. She is not only a great artist, but also a great instructor, having done courses for us before. So if that's something you are interested in, I would encourage you to check that out. If you have not, since we had taken a summer hiatus because we know it's hard to want to come inside, during the long summer evenings, just a refresher on our virtual programming protocol. We ask that you mute yourselves during the program so that we don't pick up any background information. If you have a question, the easiest way to ask that question mid-program is to type it directly into the chat field at the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I'll be monitoring that, and I can always jump in and ask those questions of Lori. If it's not a clarifying question, we'll probably wait until the end to ask those questions. And at that time, you are also welcome to unmute yourself and ask any questions of her directly. Woo, so that's my song and dance. I know it's been a while since I've gone through the whole thing. But with that, I am going to hand things over to our executive director and floral aficionado, Lori Kinsey.
Well, thank you very much, Nora. I appreciate it. I'm just going to add a little bit more before I get started about the field trip tomorrow, if anyone is interested. It's about a 4-mile hike, and the majority of it is on pretty compact trails in and out of Pondicherry. We're doing a point-to-point and a car shuttle and all that, but there is one area, the beginning part is more of a hiking trail, and just would like people to know what they're getting into if they do want to go. But it is a beautiful spot, one of my favorites. So anyway, all right, well, I am going to jump right in with our program here, and Wildflowers of Late Summer. So I love flowers, as you might have seen with the array of flowers behind me, but following the seasons with flowers starts in the spring with the arrival of plants like flowers like trailing arbutus and other spring ephemerals in our woodlands. And then from there, we move to trilliums, lady slippers, and then mountain laurel by late June. And oxeye, daisy, and golden alexander are the first early late spring and early July flowers. But when we start seeing flowers such as these that are on the screen, we are into summer flowers flowing into autumn, which is the topic of my talk this evening. And I'll be talking about each one of these flowers here that are featured here. Oh, why is that? So one of the differences of the summer flowers is that you see them everywhere: roadsides, fields, forest edges, and wetlands. A mixture of flowers grow together. Look at this roadside picture here, where I counted no less than 7 different species of flowers just on a simple walk up the road by my house. Why am I? Oops. Sorry, I'm having problems making it go here. There we go. I'm just doing a quick review of pollination, because as beautiful as flowers are, their seeds are just as fascinating. And fall in particular is the seed season, where we get a lot of awesome berries and fruits and other kind of interesting seeds that are formed. So we have your basic flower structure here, and as most people remember, that we have pollen that is located on the stamen, particularly the anther of the flower, that needs to travel down this hollow tube here, which is, oops, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Oh, sorry. There we go. Which is a hollow tube which goes to the bottom, which we call the ovary, where the seed is actually formed. Now, in order for this to happen, of course, we need to have some kind of insect, a bee, a butterfly, other insects, or wind that's going to move the pollen around. Majority of flowers, you need to move it from one flower, or it works best, one flower to another flower. So one trillium to another trillium, and not a self-pollinating movement. But tonight I'm going to spend a lot of time. There are a lot of flowers that fall into this composite family, which can be a little confusing, because they are actually these inflorescences are clusters of little flowers that seem like one big flower. So we have all these. Oh, what am I doing? I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. All the little disc florets you see in that picture there are little individual flowers, and then you have these big ray florets around the outside. So think of a dandelion and all of the seeds that a dandelion produces. So all of these are variations of composite flowers. So goldenrod, oxeye daisy, sunflowers, black-eyed Susan, and so forth. And that is the flower that we will start with, is the black-eyed Susan. Black-eyed Susans are members of the composite family, probably one of our earliest summer flowers, quite common. I find them a very cheerful plant. They grow in open spaces, so it could be on the edge of a field. It could be along the edge of your garden. The flower sits atop a bristly stem. They definitely have a rough feeling to their stem, and they really flower for a long time. I mean, they had started flowering in July, and black-eyed Susans are still flowering and going strong in my yard here in Jackson. Now, these seeds are a valuable food source for birds in the winter. So I would encourage you to leave not only black-eyed Susan stems, but all of your flower stems up throughout the winter, because they do provide a valuable food source for many different types of wildlife. Queen Anne's lace is a member of the parsley family, and is actually a non-native plant found throughout the lower 48 states and most of Canada. It's a hardy summer flower, common in dry, unmown fields. Again, I still have some Queen Anne's lace that's blooming in my front yard. The flower is in the form of an umbel, which is this kind of flat, almost umbrella shaped design. And if you look very carefully, you can often see a little purple dot right in the middle of the flower. The leaves are very fine, almost kind of remind me of dill or parsley, as it is a member of the parsley family. They have a very strong odor, which attracts more than 60 varieties of different pollinators, bees, butterflies, and other insects. They have another name, wild carrot, and that comes from this white carrot-like root, which actually is not very good at all. So don't think you're going to be pulling them up and having a nice salad out of Queen Anne's lace there. And it did get its name, in fact, from Queen Anne, who had a liking for lacy things, I guess. Yarrow is a flower that some people might confuse with Queen Anne's lace, only in that it's white and blooms around the same time. Yarrow is a member of the composite family, grows in fields and roadsides, and it's named after, its Latin name is Achillea millefolium. So it's named after the plentiful leaves, which are what we call bipinnate, which are the leaflets branch off of a stem, and then smaller sub-leaflets branch off of that, giving it a very lacy effect. Ferns often have that same kind of design in their leaves. They have a very long flowering season. Again, probably July through well into September, maybe even to early October. They're pretty hardy, which almost guarantees that they're going to be pollinated. They spread by seeds, but they also spread by underground runners. And they also have a pungent odor, which actually helps protect the plant from other harmful insects that might want to eat the plant. I found this line in one of a book that I was using, and I thought it was kind of funny. It says, "It has been eaten, drunk, smoked, snorted, and bathed in by many people over the years." So it had lots of medicinal and herbal uses. Another name for it was sometimes called woundwort or carpenter's weed, because it was used so often in curing, healing wounds and so forth. But it also was used for toothaches, stomach aches, earaches, you name it, it was used for it. And apparently the leaves were also used and dried and ground. It was called old man's pepper. So apparently has a little bit of a kick to it. So now, one of my favorite flowers of this time of year is Joe Pye weed. And if you look at the flower on the left and just start counting how many butterflies you see in there, it is a magnet for monarch butterflies. I was over at a friend of mine's house this afternoon, has just fabulous gardens, and I am not kidding you, there were no less than 20 to 25 monarch butterflies on her Joe Pye weed, just flying all around. It's a very tall plant. It was tall. At her house, the plant was over my head. It was that tall, and I am about 5'6" feet tall. So it can be quite tall. It's a plant of wetland areas. This picture on the right is actually taken at Pondicherry. And so it's a common site there in wet areas. We have it growing at Tin Mountain by our pond, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful plant. Now you might wonder, who was Joe Pye? Well, he was a Native American who really promoted the use of this plant to treat typhus fever and other ailments. So that's where the name came from there. Boneset is a flower that you would commonly find in pretty similar areas where you would find Joe Pye weed. And boneset is a cool plant because it falls into this category of, it's something called doctrine of signature, which is basically that there's something about the plant that tells you what it's good for, to be used for medicinally. And in this case, boneset was used because the stem perforates the leaves. It just goes right through. So it's completely straight across. And so people looked at it and thought, oh, I bet you this helps mend broken bones. And then hence the name. Well, again, member of the composite family. It grows to be about 5 feet tall in a wetland environment, like wet, sunny meadows, and plenty of those at Pondicherry. I'm sure we'll see some of these tomorrow. Historically, it was one of the most widely used plants medicinally, not only for setting broken bones, but it was commonly found hanging to dry in the attics of countryside homes. And it was used as a tea for fevers, treatment for colds, and apparently it tasted terrible. So if you saw mom coming to you with a cup of boneset tea, you wanted to get out of there because it was not a tasty treatment, but quite effective. I find this flower, common fleabane, just very cute, for lack of a better word. It's a very cheery flower. It is, again, composite. It's like the classic composite flower there, with pinkish or white flowers with about 100 to 150 of those individual rays around the outside. These plants can also be quite tall. I have, a lot of people would look at this and say, oh, it's a weed. I have these growing. They transplant themselves into my garden, and I just don't have the heart to pull them out because I think they are, they're just endearing flowers. And yes, in fact, they were named after the superstition that if you hung these in your house, that you would rid your house of fleas. So, common fleabane. Now, the common mullein is a very interesting flower. I've always liked them because they can just grow really tall, and they grow in these like totally random places. The picture on the left was from an earlier trip around a month ago with Mr. Gavatsky to Pondicherry, and it was growing in an area in the forest where there had been an opening, a disturbance right beside the trail. A tree had fallen down, and the mullein had taken advantage of this nice sunny spot to grow. Now, the lower right hand, I hesitate to touch my screen here. I'm trying to get the arrow. Here we go. This picture right here, they have this basal roseate of leaves, which are very, very fuzzy and thick. And these leaves and then they have the spike that grows up in the middle. And the leaves act like a funnel for catching the rainwater, and it directs it down to the roots of the plant. Now, people were pretty innovative in the use of mullein leaves. They would use them for insulation in shoes for wintertime, or their clothing to help provide some warmth. I've also heard that they were used by women to rub their cheeks to get almost like a blush, to get their cheeks nice and cherry red there. But they were also had a multitude of uses for medicinal uses as well. Hummingbirds use the downy, fluffy leaves to line their nests. Many birds eat the seeds. The spike, it flowers not all at once, but it flowers in almost like rows. And then after it flowers, the seeds are just caught in this big long stalk. It's almost like a musical instrument. You can just hear them rattling around in there. It's really quite an attractive pollinator for a fair amount of bees and other insects. So I'm sure people are familiar with seeing them either roadside, garden side, in the forest, wherever. They're pretty common, as the name suggests. And they're a member of the figwort family. So remember that, because there's another plant that is very different than this that's a member of that family too. Field pussy toes is just such a unique plant in that it has quite an interesting name, and it literally comes from the fact that if you rub the flower top, it feels like the bottom of a cat's foot. And another, believe it or not, composite family. As I mentioned, there are quite a few summer flowers that fit into that category. Earlier this summer, I just remember one morning at Tin Mountain going out, and it's one of these deals. If you see one pussy toe, you see there's a big patch of them, and they were just covered with some dew and just sparkling in the morning sunlight. It was quite a pretty sight, as is the sunset right now. I'm sorry, I can't. If you have a window, quick look out. It's quite pretty. All right, steeplebush and meadowsweet. Now, this is a plant I tend to get confused. They're both members of the rose family. They tend to grow in similar habitats, and that would be kind of wet soil area, though meadowsweet can go into a bit more drier area. So let's start with steeplebush, and it has a steeple-like shape, a very pointy top to it, a much pinker flower than the meadowsweet. So you can see this one is literally right beside the water, but it can also kind of grow in wet areas in fields and pastures. And if you feel the underside of the leaves, they tend to be hairy. Bees and butterflies flock to them for nectar, and actually many different varieties of sparrows will choose to build a nest in the steeplebush, which they do the same in meadowsweet. So meadowsweet, on the other hand, the one here on the right, is a bit of a wider, squatter flower than the steeplebush. They're kind of whitish to pale pink flowers, and actually is an important food source for white-tailed deer. They also do have sparrows that tend to nest in them, and it is actually a good bee pollinator plant as well. So that's steeplebush and meadowsweet. Now, this is just an awesome flower. I was so excited when I found these last summer at Pondicherry, and this is the gentian. Now, there's actually, as Mr. Gavoski told me just today, actually both the narrow-leaved and the bottled gentian, and I'll share that picture in just a minute. But the narrow-leaved gentian, gentian's general, just very interesting flower. If you look at them, you think, oh my gosh, I mean, they're so tightly closed. How on earth is any pollinator ever going to get in there? Well, bumblebees are pretty tenacious, and they force their way into the flower, as you can see on this next slide that David took just the other day. I mean, look at that bee. He is just head first going deep into that flower, forces their way in, and they're going after the nectar. And you got to think, wow, that must be some good nectar for them to be so persistent in getting it. Well, in fact, it is one of the richest flowers in nectar quantity and quality. So each flower can contain up to 45 milliliters of nectar, and it contains 40% sugar. So that's pretty high odds for a good meal for a bumblebee. What else is kind of interesting is that bumblebees are also the pollinators of other hard to get into flowers like Dutchman's breeches or turtlehead. So they have a lot of practice getting into these oddly shaped flowers. The adaptation for that of being closed too would be that it helps protect the plant from the pollen being washed away in rain. And think about all the rain we've had over this past summer. So you could see that that could technically be a problem. So let's quickly just look at the difference between the bottle gentian and the narrow leaf. And look at the leaves on the bottle gentian, and I'll go back to the narrow leaf, and you can easily see the difference. The narrow leaf is much narrower, of course. Now, the narrow leaf gentians, where I saw them was about in the we're in the power line area, so in that area. And the bottle gentian, I don't know. We're going to find them tomorrow, hopefully. So I've got directions of where they are vaguely. So, but I just love that picture. Thank you, David. That's just great. Another favorite of my summer wildflowers is the jewelweed, or another name for it is spotted touch-me-not. So it has this unique orange trumpet-like flower, and that's not where it gets its name. The jewelweed part comes from the way the water sparkles on the leaves after a dew or a heavy rain, and the touch-me-not comes from, you can see the seed pod, like right in here. That one's not really that swollen at this point, but as the season progresses, they get fatter and fatter. And if you just literally tap them with your fingers, it boing, shoots the seeds, and they'll go a good 3-4 inches away from the plant. There is definitely some force in there with the idea of you got to get your seeds away from you so they have some room to grow. Jewelweed or touch-me-not is a great hummingbird plant. I have a patch right by my dining room window, and I have been entertained all summer by the hummingbirds just zipping in there and getting, they've got the long probing beak to stick way into that. It's a flower designed for that, way into the flower to get to the to nectar. The other good thing to know about jewelweed is it's a good remedy for insect bites and poison ivy, things that itch. If you just break the stem and just kind of rub it on you, actually stinging nettles too, I believe, it helps take away some of the itch. I've definitely used it for that before. So that's jewelweed. So now this flower, American spikenard, is, you'd have to go into the forest to find this. This is a member of the ginseng family. And it's not that common. And we saw some last year on the property in Albany at Tin Mountain. And it's, for me, the highlight was actually, we saw it in berries, which is the right-hand picture here. And, but they have a greenish white flower, and they grow in clusters in these somewhat umbels, and they have large heart-shaped leaves. And then later in the summer, they have these dark purple edible berries. And they had a very interesting, very kind of ginsengy, gingery kind of taste to them. But you're going to have to get to them early, because birds and chipmunks, as you can imagine, love to make a feast of these as well. So that's the American spikenard. Now, this was a plant that we did see on our last trip to Pondicherry as well, growing right beside the trail. And this is an orchid, helleborine. And I was all excited to see this, and not sure I had ever seen it before. And then came to find out that actually many people consider it an invasive plant, which is really kind of an interesting concept for, you think orchids are rare and unusual, to then just have it be invasive. The invasive part, it's fairly common throughout New England and quickly becoming invasive. It grows to be about 1 to 2 feet high. The flowers are on this one stalk here. The concern for the plant is that it's taking over the mycorrhizal fungi of other native orchids. And that basically is something that's in the soils that these orchids need. It's a relationship that they have. And if it is being taken over by this flower, then some of our other orchids, which could also be rare, aren't able to survive. Excuse me. So that's the Helberine. Still a pretty flower. Common St. John's wort, a very common flower of the summer. 5 bright yellow petals. You can see the pistils and stamens sticking right out there. Very common, bees, butterflies in terms of pollinators. Pretty much grows anywhere, fields and waste places. It was as recently as the late 1900s, 1996, was used to treat depression and anti-anxiety, and was studied to be used as a medicine. It's still commonly found in like a health food store. You could find a tea or a tincture or something along those lines to help with to remedy depression. Sweet like clover was interesting to me. When you hear the word clover, I think you're thinking of, purple clover or the white clover that grows in your grass in your front yard. And this was very different than that. It's a plant that can be 8 feet tall, 3 to 8 feet tall. Flowers, multitudes of flowers, and very actually fragrant leaves. And it was just covering the sides of the trail into Pondicherry in one section. It was quite pretty and quite alive with pollinators, if I remember well. Right. Common evening primrose. I was sitting at my breakfast table looking out the window this morning and saw a hummingbird visiting a primrose just outside of the window. As the name suggests, actually blooms mostly at nighttime, and then hence would be pollinated by moths instead of our butterflies or other daytime pollinators. So again, a flower of kind of fields, waste areas, grows to be 1 to 6 feet high. It's eaten a lot by deer. Many birds seek out the seeds, and Japanese beetles actually like to eat the leaves of the common evening primrose. And there's quite a group of them there. I believe that picture was up at Pondicherry as well. Interesting flower here, the virgin bower, and it's really a viney thicket that this plant forms. Many people know it probably more for its unique seed over here, this kind of spidery seed pod that it has. But the flowers are pretty similar to that, actually. A very dense covering of it. They tend to grow in wet areas, on riverbanks or moist, wet thickets. And this was a patch in my backyard, and it was just a huge, huge patch there. And then the seeds tend to hang on well into the winter. I would imagine with the fluffiness that also could be used later into the season with birds lining their nests as well. Similarly is the fireweed in terms of the seed, but flower is quite different, and it gets its name true to what it's saying, that it's an early colonizer of recently burned sites. So one of the first plants or flowers to come in, beautiful pinky purple flower in this nice spiky raceme, and you can get large patches of them. It isn't only found in fire areas. I have seen them roadside and as well. But once they bloom, they also have this kind of unique seed pod with the white fluff, which lends itself to flying and traveling and settling in other areas. So that is fireweed. All right. You knew it was going to happen. Goldenrod. Yes. So goldenrod is our most common, one of our most common summer flowers, and probably the one with the worst reputation. And it's all because of this guy right here, which is really the culprit, which is ragweed. And they couldn't be more different. All right. I'll start with ragweed. Ragweed is, it's green. The flower is green. They can be quite tall. They are a wind pollinated plant, and that flower, and that is very important to remember, because goldenrod, on the other hand, is not wind pollinated. It is insect pollinated. They have actually very sticky, heavy pollen. It does not fly very well at all. So for all you allergy sufferers out there, it's ragweed that's causing your problems, not goldenrod. So goldenrod is a fascinating plant in that it is, there's over 20,000 species of goldenrod worldwide, with 25 species in this region. And I know that most people will look at a goldenrod and say, oh, it's a goldenrod, and call it a day. But I'm encouraging you to look further. Goldenrod is literally the group of herbaceous perennials that support the highest number of beneficial insects in New England. Now, look at this picture of how many different kinds of pollinators could be found on goldenrods. We've got bees, we've got moths, we've got butterflies, we've got things I don't even know what they are. It looks like ladybug type things. But they are just visited by so many insects. I'm going to continue here. We've got the monarch, we've got some bees, this green, I don't know if that's a bee as well. Look at the antenna on this other guy on the lower right hand side. So they are important in terms of very beneficial flower for many of our insects. Now, goldenrods really aren't, once you stop to take a look, it's you just need to look for certain characteristics and you can figure out the species. Now, I'm going to encourage everybody, at the end I'll show you some resources in terms of field guides and so forth, but the book I recommend is Newcomb's Wildflower Guide, and at the very end of the book, the whole last 2 sections are on goldenrods and asters. And it really is helpful to just look through that and follow the key, and you can figure out what these plants are. So basically the things you're looking for are the shape of the flowers. We have ones like down here, the gray goldenrod, which is just kind of a one-sided arch. We have these flat-topped goldenrods. Then we have these many arched, they're in many different directions. So there's different flower designs. And as in other plants, there are many different leaf designs and shapes, narrow, heart-shaped, basal, and so forth. They range in size quite differently, from 6 inches to 6 feet. And then of course, habitat. So you need to put all of those things together in order to figure out what you're looking at. So Canada goldenrod is one of your most common one. Lance leaf goldenrod has these really thin leaves, and the gray goldenrod has this very arching stem to it. But the easiest one to figure out is this guy right here, the zigzag goldenrod. It literally zigzags up the stem. And this one grows in the forest. So this is a woodland goldenrod. So that's pretty easy to figure out. Blue stem goldenrod, check out the color of the stem. And the leaves are quite different. The flowers are growing in the axils of the plants. These are all things that are in the field guide that you can be looking for as keys to what it is. Rough stem goldenrod, true to its name. Look at the hairy stem on that. This would be one way to tell the difference between this, because doesn't that look a lot like the Canada goldenrod that we started out with? But the stems are quite different. So there's some real keys here that can help you figure it out. And then the last one is silverrod, which is in the goldenrod family, but it's a white goldenrod. So, and that's one, they literally grow in the sand. The Wildcat River goes very close to my house, and this is the sandy embankment there, and they thrive right there in this very, very sandy soil. So, and silverrod is actually pretty common. I see that around a fair amount in sandy places, roadsides, waste areas, and things like that. But it is a unique flower for its white color, even though it's a goldenrod. And then, of course, asters are similar in that are very good pollinators at this time of year. Again, all kinds of butterflies and bees visiting the many different kinds of asters. And the Newcombs also has a great section on asters. The one that probably most people are familiar with and like the best are the beautiful New England asters. It's a very large plant, very tall plant. Again, asters and goldenrods are all in the composite family, and they're vividly purple, and there's tons of flowers on them. They're, I would say they're common, not as keep an eye out for them. They're easy to spot. But so are a lot of the other ones. So you do have to figure them out. Here on the left, we have the heart-leafed aster. Well, that's pretty straightforward with the heart-shaped leaf. But see how different the flower looks on the heart-leafed aster versus that New England aster. And then, of course, the purple-stemmed aster. There's your big clue right there. The flower, a little more similar to the New England aster, but still different enough to be able to differentiate between the two. Now, if that's not enough, asters come in different colors too. So we have white asters as well. And the two that I'm showing here are the white wood aster, this guy over here, which is a woodland flower. And that is an early bloomer, blooms July through October. And then over here, we have the white wood aster, and they tend to be, the flat topped aster. They're pretty tall and large and tend to be in wet areas. Whereas the white wood aster, true to its name, is a woodland aster. So, all right, let's pretend you're hopping into your kayak or your canoe at this point, and we're going to look at some wetland flowers to finish up the evening here. And yes, this is a beautiful cattail, and we are looking at their beautiful brownish flowers, which we see in a dense spike. And if you look very closely at the flower, the upper part of the plant up here is the male part of the plant, and then the lower part is the female part of the plant. They grow to be 4 to 8 feet high. And I know we're all probably pretty familiar with them, but just as people were innovative with the use of the mullein leaves, same goes for the fluffy cattail head. They were used in everything from insulation and clothing, pillows, mattresses, quilts, and life jackets. They used to use the cigar heads as fire starters. And this is a highly edible plant. You can eat almost every part of a cattail. The leaves can be used in a salad. The stems can be eaten raw or boiled. The young flowers can be roasted. The pollen can be used as a thickener in soups or stews. And some people even mix it with flour for making bread. And the root can also be dried and ground up and roasted to make a nutritious flour. So that is a plant that is a valuable food source, not only for people, but a great wildlife food. They've got huge rhizomes that muskrats and so forth would love to feast on. And cattails, they really are competing against a lot of other invasives, such as Phragmites, which is taking over a lot of cattail areas, and also purple loosestrife, which can choke out an area of cattails as well, which would just be really tragic because they're just such an important wildlife food and just in our landscape, an important flower. Now, cotton grass is actually a sedge, which has a 3-sided stem, but it's definitely in our wetland landscape. So I decided to include it in here tonight. So if you look out over that view there, you can see the cotton grass in that very wet area there. And that's a good indicator that you wouldn't, if you were hiking or so forth, you wouldn't want to be charging across there, because you would have some pretty wet feet by the end of your walk. And again, the very soft, fluffy grasses were often used for wounds and stopping bleeding in, let's say early wars, First World War and so forth, before, we had the advent of a lot of good bandages and so forth. The seeds are also good food for grouse and other wildlife. Another one of my favorite fall, late summer and early fall flowers is the cardinal flower. Gets its name from its beautiful bright red flowers. Of course, this is in the lobelia family. And just by design, again, that flower is just made for hummingbirds. And hummingbirds and butterflies both pollinate it, and they both, either with their long beak or their very long proboscis, to get to the nectar. Now, there are very few red colored flowers in the wild, and interestingly enough, the range of the red cardinal flower and the ruby-throated hummingbird is almost identical. And so they really do have quite the relationship there. They aren't that common. I mean, it's always a treat to see a cardinal flower, particularly in the wild. I know you can also grow them in gardens and so forth, but they are definitely a plant that likes their feet wet. They literally are growing right streamside or in the water, and just such a beautiful, beautiful flower. Unfortunately, they have been overpicked, and losing wetlands, they aren't that common. So if you see one, enjoy. Turtle heads. You gotta love this plant. It is such a, and it's at its height right now. I will say there's a lot of turtle heads blooming down around in Albany by our offices, and I have a nice little wetland by my house where they also are growing. This is the other flower that is a member of the figwort family that I had mentioned earlier, like the mullein. So it seems very different to me than a mullein, mostly because of where they grow. But if you want to have a little fun with the turtle head, you take the flower and you can kind of bounce it up and down, and you can make it talk. So if you have a youngster in your life, you can have a little conversation with the turtle head, which is quite entertaining. If you were a bumblebee, you'd have to force your way into that flower to get to the nectar in there. And again, one of the only insects that can actually get in there. And sometimes what happens is they get in there and they get trapped, and then they start banging around, they get coated with pollen, come out, and then do it all over again, and hence pollination happens. They have an interesting relationship with this butterfly, the Baltimore checker spot, which lays its eggs on the plant. Then once the eggs hatch, the caterpillars spin thick webs over the plant, and then the next spring when they hatch, they end up eating the leaves. So just a different kind of relationship that the insect has with this plant, the turtle head. And again, a plant that grows in literally water. We were this morning seeing them growing in Cream Brook, in moving water, again, in the swamp by my yard. That being said, we have them growing in a perennial garden at Tin Mountain as well, which is not that wet. So pretty adaptable. Now we're really getting into the water here. I'm looking at a couple of our water lilies. We have the sweet scented water lily here, which is kind of your Monet water lily. They are an aquatic plant of still waters with their very showy white fragrant flowers. Now all of these water lilies are so important wetland plants for so many reasons. We've got this great, the flower, the beautiful leaves, which provide cover for fish, for macroinvertebrates. And then I'm going to just move on to the spatterdock lily, which is another kind of lily, which also has big leaves, which also produces protection for those things I just mentioned. Well, then along comes a muskrat, and they'll go for both of these plants have tremendous tubers for roots, and so they become great food. Ducks then go and are eating either parts of the plant or eating the insects. So they're very important in the whole dynamics of the wetland in providing food, shelter, protection, and so forth. Same with the pickerel weed, a flower, purple flower, got these very pointy leaves. And who do you suppose hangs out under those leaves? Of course, pickerel and other fish as well. This one you're going to have to look really close for. Water shield is a tiny little lily that has, I'm going to say the leaves are about the size of a 50-cent piece, maybe a little bit smaller. Sometimes they're called water penny, but it's the flower that's really hard to see. It's just that very little pink flower sticking up. Now, these were blooming probably 3 weeks ago when we were up at Lake Mbagog. So you might find a random one still blooming now, but at the same time, we had this very unique horned bladderwort, which is actually a carnivorous plant. The bladder, the bladders in the on the leaves of the plant actually will capture insects as they go swimming by, and it just has this very tiny little yellow flower that sticks up. But all of these are in quiet waters, swamps, marshes, wetland areas. Now, this is not a wetland plant, but our last wildflower of the evening anyway is a shrub, and that is our latest blooming shrub is witch hazel. And they've got these beautiful yellow spidery looking flowers, and these guys will bloom as late as early October into mid-October. So you can start looking for them in September, and sometimes they're hard to see. It's if the leaves are still on the trees, but once those leaves drop, it's pretty easy to spot the witch hazel flowers. And yes, this is the witch hazel that you're thinking of that you can use as an anti-astringent. And a lot of people use it for treating bruises and insect bites and so forth. The seeds are persistent and are eaten by grouse, turkeys, songbirds, and small rodents throughout the winter. Witch hazel is a medium-sized shrub, I would say, that is fairly common throughout the forest. Okay, I'm just gonna talk about two more flowers that actually are garden flowers, but I just couldn't pass them up because they are such important pollinators, and it's something you could easily just add to your garden. This is a plant called Liatris, and it is, I mean, look at that. There are just, I'm going to say 10, 12 monarch butterflies on there. They just feast on the nectar on this plant. And then this is our native bergamot, and it's called Monarda fistulosa, and it's this great, I can never say this, so a great American fritillaries, the butterfly that is all over this. We have a ton of this at Tin Mountain, and it is always covered with butterflies. So this is, I think most people are familiar with bee balm as the red bee balm, but this is the native one that you would find growing around here. And again, just a great addition to your garden. And I would encourage everyone to put some of that in their garden as well. All right, a couple of resources. As I mentioned, we've got Newcomb's Wildflower Guide over here, and it's a key system and very easy in the front of the book. I'll go over it tomorrow for those of us on the on the trip. So that's great. You have to have the flower to make it work though. This other book, Wildflowers of the White Mountains, is a color base. So if you have a yellow flower, you turn to the yellow section and you can page through and find what you're looking for. So there's definitely a time and a place for a book like that. And that's just a handy little book to have along. Then these other books over here on the right are books that I use to find some of the information about kind of the medicinal uses and more of the folklore kind of stuff. So this one up here, Secrets of Wildflower, goes into great detail about a lot of those kinds of things. That has a lot of great folklore and so forth in it. I really have always liked this book as well, and it's called New England's Mountain Flowers, and it's old at this point, but it was put out by Jeff Wallner, who used to work at the Society for Protection of New Hampshire Forests, and again, just has great pictures and a lot of good natural history and cultural history about each of the plants. All of the shrub information, you can't beat this book, Shrubs of the Northern New England Forest, written by Michael Klein, who was the director at Tin Mountain for many, many years. So, and we actually have that book for sale at the office if you are interested in it. And then last, this is, if you're a gardener, Native Plants for New England Gardeners, which is for New England Gardens. And so they gave some good suggestions of wildflowers that you can be planting in your garden as well. So a great little bibliography there of books for you to keep in mind for flowers in all seasons, actually. And then I'll just also add some good places that you could go looking for wildflowers. In Carroll County, of course, you could come down to Tin Mountain. In Albany, we've got over 300 acres of all kinds of habitats and all kinds of things blooming. We have our facility in Jackson on Tin Mine Road, and they have fields and forests, so there's always something blooming up there. The Thompson Preserve in Tamworth, if you're down in the southern part of the county, and then Thorn Pond in Bartlett is an interesting spot too for flowers. Up in Coos County, Mud Pond is near, all of these are kind of in the Pondicherry area, Mud Pond, Pondicherry Trail, and Slide Brook Trail. And this is where we'll be tomorrow, Slide Brook into the Pondicherry Trail. And then the Rocks Estate in Bethlehem is a wonderful spot for flowers. And then if you were wanting to get in that canoe, head up to Lake Umbagog, because that's just lovely up there for so many reasons, including wildflowers. And other locations, one of my very favorite places in the world, the Brownfield Bog in Brownfield, Maine. And again, all kinds of flowers, shrubs, trees, birds. It's just a wonderful place to explore. And then I just put roadsides anywhere, because at this time of year, you can be anywhere and see very cool flowers. So, all right, who's ready for a quiz? All right. Oh, what happened? That went too fast. Well, I'll go back. One of the other cool things at this time of year are the fruits that we have on our different shrubs. So I have 4 different shrubs here, and I'm just going to give everybody a minute to look at them. And I'm going to say you can unmute at this point, and we'll go. I'll put the pointer one at a time, starting in the left-hand corner, and see if we can identify what shrub it is. So feel free to just holler what it is. Okay, how about this one? Any takers? All right, then I'll show you that it is elderberry. This is just coming in. So if you're a jelly person, keep your eye open for these shrubs get loaded with berries. Okay.
We did, Lori, we did have someone, I should say, Sharon typed elderberry into the chat.
Oh,
so
okay, good. All right,
was
we'll just
on
holler, I don't care. So unfortunately, I gave the next one away already. It's with Rod at the bottom. And I love this one because of the way it starts out pink and then they turn blue, and they're just beautiful and awesome. So they're just well into that right now. Okay, how about our upper right-hand corner here? Anybody have an idea what that is?
Click that
Guy
right
over
there.
here.
The box.
What was it? Okay, it is one of my favorites, chokecherry. And I have spent many an afternoon watching the chipmunks just kind of hanging from the tree branch, just eating all of the chokecherries. I think they're actually probably all gone by now. So, and then the last one, who recognizes this one?
Honeysuckle.
No.
Hobblebush.
Hobblebush, there you go. So hobblebush, and these are just, hobblebush is really coming into its own right now too, with both the leaves changing color and the berries. All right, so that's that. I'm going back because there was another. These are actually flowers. These are your spring wildflowers that are now in fruit. So take a minute to look at those, and then we'll go around and see what we can come up with.
Heads.
Okay, this one is just downright creepy. So who knows what this one is? Anybody?
Nope.
Its nickname is Doll's Eye.
Doll's Eye, right? I was gonna say that one's.
And
Doll's
it's actually,
Eye.
it's white baneberry. Oh, why can't I?
Oh,
There we go. White baneberry. So they just are really, you know, you come upon them, it's like, whoa. And the red stems, the white with the little black dot. Okay, right below it is a relative, and that is red baneberry. Pretty subdued after that other one up there, right? Okay, how about the upper right-hand corner? Anybody? That's a fairly common one.
Not a clue.
Okay, how about bunchberry? So if you're up above tree line at this point, I bet you're seeing the berries. They're starting to come in. All right, how about down here? This one has it right in its name. Well, one of its name, blue bead lily or Clintonia. And then lastly, how about this one up here?
That one's Trillium, isn't it?
It is Trillium. Okay, there's the $20 question, Nora. Is it red?
I know, and it's like the leaf. I'm looking, I can see the leaf, and it's like,
it's painted Trillium. And how you know that is,
yes,
you look very carefully. You can see a stem. Oops.
I saw that, and it was like, oh, is it which one has the stem?
Oh, I've lost it there. The painted Trillium has I'll stop there. Painted Trillium has a stem, whereas red Trillium clasps the whole, you can't tell the difference. So anyway, well, there you go, everybody. Just a little quiz to put you to bed tonight. So anyway, that is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have about flowers, fall flowers, spring, summer flowers.
I have any questions.
No, if there are no questions.
I have a question for you. Yes, I have a question for you, Lori.
Okay.
I'm going to ask one of those unfair questions. And that is, if you had to choose.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. Which one is your favorite late summer wild?
Oh. Okay. I said 3. I said Joe Pye weed, jewelweed, and cardinal flower were my favorite. So
they are all very different.
They are all very different, but you know, oh gosh, no, that's an unfair question, Nora. So Joe, I really like Joe Pye weed. I mean, seeing that today was unbelievable. How many butterflies were at her house, and I didn't get a chance. I skipped over this side. It's my friend is Jen Hohenboken, and she took some of the slides in the show tonight, as did David Gavoski, and then some of them were my own, and then I did take a few from the internet as well. But boy, Jen has just these fabulous gardens, and being over there and seeing all those butterflies was just fabulous. So, but I've been really entertained by the hummingbirds at the jewelweed, and I'm cheap little thrill to pop the seeds and have them go. I'm easily entertained, guys. That's all I can say. Right? Yeah, and cardinal flowers, they're unusual and rare, and anyway, it's always fun to see.
Oh,
But
Lori Jean, I've got a question.
yeah,
It's Tony. I couldn't, I tried to send this in chat and it didn't seem to go through, but I had the butterfly that was on the turtle head.
yeah.
You didn't mention what it was, I don't think.
Okay, yeah,
It's
I
a
think I got
Baltimore
it.
checker spot.
Yes, Baltimore checker spot. Yep,
And I had to
meant
look it
if I
up
didn't.
in this
Yeah.
book and you can see the picture. This is Butterflies of New England.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
says in here that eating the turtle head makes the adult checker spots taste bad.
Oh, interesting. All the more, so they have a great relationship with that plant. Wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. On that note, I have to tell you a story about what happened at work today. So someone told me, oh, Matt and Phaedra are watching Monarch. I thought something was hatching or whatever, but I came around the corner. Phaedra is our education director, and she's just sitting at the side of the building, staring at a monarch caterpillar that was in the J shape. So it was starting to form a chrysalis. I don't know how long she had been there, but she was watching. She had taken a couple of pictures. And, I watched her for a little bit and it's like, I said, how long does it take? And she's like, anywhere from 12 to 24 hours or something. I was like, okay, I'm going to go eat lunch now, right? And then we went and we ate lunch and she came back and so that was, let's say an hour went past and she came back. She said, look, it had gone and formed its complete chrysalis in that period of time. I'm like, why did we leave?
It goes so
It
fast.
was
fast. It's
unbelievable.
fast.
Yeah.
And you never catch it. We had one that was the kids found a monarch and a jay hang on the dill in front of our house, and it's potted, and it was like primed to be knocked into. So we had to, it had already, attached itself, but it wasn't in a chrysalis. We put it in a container. I'm not kidding you. 15 minutes later, because our oldest was like, I'm gonna see it shed its skin. 15 minutes later, she went back out and it was already in its
Wow.
chrysalis.
Yeah. It was cool because it wasn't, it was still really, really sheer. So you could still, you could tell it literally had just happened. But anyway, that was a pretty awesome sighting at Tin Mountain today. So anyway, well, look, guys, I encourage everybody to get out there, look for some flowers. Don't be stymied by goldenrod. Take the plunge and really look at your nucleums. It's cool. I got into this a couple of years ago and just decided that I wanted to learn the differences between the goldenrods and asters. So there you go, personal challenge. So anyway, and if you have any questions, call Nora, right? All right, everyone. Well, thank you and have a good evening.
Thanks, Lori.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.